Episode 1 of Widow's Bay opens at sea where a man sailing alone at night vents over the radio about his divorce. He's speaking to his friend Lonnie at port control, but the mood shifts when Lonnie notices something moving towards him. The radio fills with static, the birds scatter, and the man turns to face the darkness, but there's nothing there. Now back in town, a group of teenagers are out smoking in a car when the radio cuts out, the lights go down, and a quake hits Widow's Bay. It's the first one to hit in 20 years, and while the local news insists no one was hurt, Mayor Tom quickly has more than enough problems on his hands. The power is out, the port is covered in fog, and Shep Clark has gone missing. Tom's bigger concern though is appearances. A New York Times journalist named Arthur has finally arrived after years of effort, and Tom is desperate for a glowing feature that could bring tourists and money into the struggling town. Unfortunately for him, Arthur's first stop happens to be the Historical Society, where Jerry gleefully fills him in on the island's grim history of cannibalism, witch hunts, and other local horrors. Tom tries to steer Arthur away from the darker legends, but the town's superstitions are impossible to ignore. Wick, one of the locals, warns Tom that the quake, the fog, and Shep's disappearance are signs that the island is finally waking up. Tom dismisses him, but Wick insists the fog has brought disaster before. According to him, the first sign is white eyes, followed by confusion, loss of the senses, and then death. Tom refuses to believe any of this, partly because he thinks Wick is bitter, and partly because admitting there may be something wrong would destroy the image he's trying to sell of the town. He even lies to the town and claims Shep has been found, despite the sheriff making it clear that things are not that simple. And that changes when Shep suddenly stumbles into the bar and collapses. He's taken to the hospital, where the doctors assume he suffered a bad fall, but Tom notices something strange in his medical chart. Shep had no alcohol in his system. Moments later, Shep wakes up, mumbles something, and his eyes turn white. He grabs Tom by the throat before collapsing and dying in front of him. The incident rattles Tom badly. He tries to continue his dinner with Arthur, but the fog outside keeps shifting, and Arthur's questions about Widow's Bay and its strange legends only make things worse. When the lights go out again and people try to leave the restaurant, Tom finally cracks and shouts that there is something in the fog. The lights return, but the damage is done. Arthur assumes the whole thing is some staged attempt to give Widow's Bay a spooky Salem-style atmosphere. Tom meanwhile knows something is very wrong. The episode then ends beneath the town, where we see a strange tunnel, a sinister chair that looks like something from a medieval torture chamber, and a rusty metal door. Whatever's happening in Widow's Bay, it clearly goes much deeper than a power outage and a bit of fog. Episode 2 of Widow's Bay begins with Tom still riding high from the New York Times feature. He's convinced tourists are finally coming, so when he sees the local cafe has brought a proper coffee machine, he treats it like another small victory for the town. That optimism doesn't last long though. Sirens lead Tom and Patricia to the local inn, where Wick is drunkenly warning everyone that it isn't safe for tourists to stay there. He accuses Tom of ignoring the island signs and calls him a coward, which hits a nerve. Tom snaps back and calls him a dumb hick, immediately realising he's gone too far. Later, while picking up dinner, Tom runs into the priest and asks him to lock the church door so teenagers like Evan can't keep ringing the bell at midnight. The priest is visibly unsettled and starts to say that shouldn't be possible, but stops himself. Now outside, several locals confront Tom over his insult to Wick and challenge him to spend the night at the supposedly haunted inn. Tom agrees, but they insist he has to stay that night in the captain's suite too, where a man once went mad and killed his family. Tom accepts the challenge to prove the cursed inn stories are nonsense, and Patricia drops him off, while Kurt, the owner, gives him a camera for proof before locking him inside. At first, Tom treats the whole thing like a bit of a joke. He records himself completing the locals' challenges, including spending time in a closet, though he draws the line at going down to the basement. However, strange things begin happening after that. A curtain he closed is suddenly opened, voices come from under the sink, and he meets another guest named William. Tom initially ignores him, but after the TV sparks and dies, he joins William downstairs for drinks. They talk about Widow's Bay together, Tom struggles as a mayor, and his past. Tom reveals he wasn't initially born there, but returned to care for his father, eventually meeting his wife. William reassures Tom that ghosts aren't real and that he is a good mayor. Encouraged, Tom finally enters the crawl space. His torch goes out and William appears behind him, only he's now dressed as a clown. Tom crawls deeper, sees a rotting body and winds up screaming. The next morning, Tom wakes up terrified. Kurt and the sheriff check the CCTV footage, but it turns out there is no William. Tom was alone the entire night, apparently talking to himself. Now Wick mocks him for this, saying the clown got him, while the sheriff notices black mold and blames that for the hallucinations. Tom refuses to admit Wick may be right, and when Patricia picks him up, he lies and says nothing actually happened. Episode 3 of Widow's Bay opens at the Historical Society, where tourists watch a video about Widow's Bay and its first mayor, Richard Warren. Jerry continues the tour, clearly delighted to share the town's darker history with them. Elsewhere, Tom is pleased to see more tourists arriving. He meets Marissa, who is lost after someone changes the street signs as a prank. Tom gives her a ride and tells her about the town's current events, including the inaugural swim and sunset cocktails. Marissa flirts with him and mentions that she and her friends may visit Barnabas Cavern later on. At the office, Tom is distracted by Marissa, much to Patricia's suspicion. And that evening, he lies to Evan and says he's meeting colleagues, then heads out hoping to see her. However, Marissa and her friends never show up. On the drive home, Tom spots an old woman by the road. When he stops to help, she suddenly runs towards his car. Tom panics and drives off, but when he stops again, she appears behind him and scratches his hand. And Tom gets the wound treated by Dr. Morgan and calls Sheriff Bashir, believing the woman may have escaped from the mainland. Bashir dismisses him, while Dr. Morgan warns Tom not to do the inaugural swim, but Tom insists the mayor has to prove the water is safe. Now back at the office, Rosemary tells Tom the woman was a sea hag. According to legend, once she scratches someone, she can track them down. Tom ignores the warning and heads outside for a swim all the same. With the beach event already underway and no working microphone, Tom addresses the crowd anyway before swimming out to the buoy. There he sees the sea hag again. He swims back in a panic, but she scratches his leg. Tom finally goes to Wick, who explains that the sea hag tracks victims through blood and skin from her scratches. Eventually she finds them when they're too weak to move. Wick tells Tom to lock himself away for 72 hours, but Tom remains skeptical about the whole thing. That night Tom goes on a date with Marissa. It goes pretty well too, and he opens up about his late wife and Evan, though he turns Marissa down when she suggests going back to his house. Meanwhile, the priest gets lost in the forest, finds an old well, and hears something strange inside. He later runs into Evan and his friend drinking, warning them that evil is in the town, but they ignore him. At home, Wick leaves Tom a warning that the sea hag will try anything to get inside. And moments later, Marissa arrives at Tom's door, but he refuses to let her in, convinced that she may be the hag. She leaves in a taxi with her friends. Tom barricades the door and falls asleep, and the sea hag appears as his dead wife, gives him a drink, and then reveals her true form. She attacks, but Tom manages to throw her back using the recliner. He crawls into the bathtub only for her to find him again. Just before she kills him, Wick arrives and shoots the sea hag. She dissolves into sea muck, leaving Tom shaken and desperate for answers. The episode then ends with Tom receiving a voicemail from Father Bryce, who says he heard it before apologising and hanging up. The final scene cuts to Bashir calling for help over the radio, admitting he has no idea what is going on. Episode 4 of Widow's Bay begins with Sheriff Bashir calling for help from Patricia's party, where something has gone badly wrong. We then jump back 4 days. Patricia is handling donations for her mobile library when she finds a self-help book called Your Turn, Out with the Old and In with the You. Later she attends a reunion party, but everyone treats her coldly. Now one woman asks Patricia about the 4 girls killed by the serial killer in town. Patricia starts to explain that she was almost a victim too, but after leaving to clean herself up, she overhears the others accusing her of making the story up for attention. Apparently police found no record of the strange call she claimed to receive before the attack. At that night, Patricia finds the self-help book inside the mobile library and begins reading it. The book tells her how to throw a party that will make people like her and over the next few days, she becomes obsessed with using it to plan sunset cocktails. However, the event is not going well. No one RSVPs, the women from the reunion choose another party instead, and Patricia becomes increasingly desperate. Meanwhile, Bashir checks CCTV while investigating Tom's old woman sighting and notices Patricia behaving rather strangely with the book. On the night of said party, Rosemary tries to warn Patricia that she seems obsessed, but Patricia shuts her down. The event starts poorly, with only a few guests showing, until Chris and her friends arrive, followed by the bachelorette group. Things quickly turn ugly though when Patricia overhears Chris gossiping about her. Chris calls her an attention seeker and accuses her of making the serial killer tragedy all about herself. Patricia runs into the kitchen and cries. The book tells Patricia to serve the punch, and once everyone drinks it, they suddenly adore her. The party comes alive. Bashir arrives after a noise complaint and finds Patricia in the kitchen, wearing a strange crown. The room is covered in slaughtered crows, broken pots and other disturbing objects. I mean, that's one hell of a party. Patricia snaps back to herself after this and realises the party decorations and the book have changed. It turns out this was never a self-help guide, it's actually a spell book. Now outside, the party guests are in an entranced state, walking toward the sea to drown themselves. Bashir tries to stop them while Patricia grabs the book and attempts to throw it into a strange bonfire on the beach. The book sticks to her hands, so Patricia holds it into the flames instead. It burns, bubbles, and finally releases her. The guests awaken, but Chris immediately accuses Patricia of drugging them. Devastated, Patricia walks home and runs into Tom and Wick after their sea hag encounter. They head to the church to check on Father Bryce, but find his office completely trashed and a document burning. Wick puts out the fire, and then Patricia opens the door and finds Bryce's body hanging from it, making it look like he killed himself. Episode 5 of Widow's Bay opens with a man crawling through the snow, eating strange black mushrooms. At Town Hall, Tom announces a sudden curfew, despite it being fireworks night. Dale is shocked, Ruth doesn't want to work all day, and Evan is furious about being forced to stay in Tom's office. Evan brings up Father Bryce's death, but Tom says they'll talk later and warns him not to leave. Now after Bryce's memorial, Tom, Wick and Patricia search his office. Wick saves one burned document and again urges Tom to tell the town the truth, though Patricia stops another argument from breaking out. Tom notices Bryce repeatedly called one other number before he died. Patricia calls it and manages to arrange a meeting. The caller happens to be Todd, a local drug dealer from her school days. Todd identifies the mushroom and says it gives people something called true sight. One of his friends took it and was never the same again, repeatedly drawing the same handprint. Wick agrees to take the mushroom to investigate the curse, but Tom accidentally drinks the mixture instead. As Tom begins hallucinating, Wick and Patricia are forced to look after him. He can barely function, to be honest, and whenever he has a moment of clarity, he keeps asking for Evan. Unfortunately, Evan has already sneaked out to meet his friends outside the town's infamous serial killer house. They smoke weed in the car and scare each other with stories, but none of them actually go inside. Now back at Town Hall, Bashir questions Tom about the curfew, but Tom is too distracted by strange sounds only he can hear. Bashir takes Patricia away to give a statement about her party, leaving Tom alone at a chaotic town meeting where the locals are furious about the cancelled fireworks. Meanwhile, Wick takes Bryce's burned paper to Jerry, who identifies it as a page from the diary of Sarah Warren, wife of the town's founder. Within it, Sarah describes Richard Warren as violent and possibly cursed, writing that the heart of the island's curse beats inside the cylinder he wears around his neck. Now Wick tells Patricia, and she brings Tom to the Historical Society, keeping him on a hand leash so he doesn't wander off. Wick suggests they may need to exhume Richard's grave and find the necklace. Tom, however, remains fixated on Evan. Ruth tries to help watch him, but Tom causes chaos during a stop at the convenience store as the hallucinations grow worse. At dusk, Evan's friends dare him to enter the serial killer's house. He nearly opens the door too, but Bashir arrives just in time and sends them all home. When Evan returns, he lashes out at Tom, accusing him of controlling him and keeping him trapped in Widow's Bay. This triggers one of Tom's buried memories. He remembers trying to leave the island with his pregnant wife Lauren. Out on the boat, Lauren suddenly went blind and panicked, forcing them to turn back. Evan was delivered safely, but Lauren remained cursed and catatonic. Now back in the present, Tom desperately prays for Evan's safety. Exhausted and vomiting, he kneels by the toilet and hears a thick, static-filled voice. He turns towards the darkness and sees something moving inside it. Then everything goes silent. Episode 6 of Widow's Bay takes us back to September 1702 when Sarah travelled to Widow's Bay Island to marry Richard Warren. She writes in a diary about her concerns, hoping he's a kind, handsome man. She arrives at the town and everyone is praising Richard. Either way, the wedding goes smoothly with only 2 witnesses. Later, Richard introduces her to his 5 children and leaves to work. Later that night, she's awoken by sounds, and upon checking downstairs, she finds him eating the black mushrooms, and he appears to be in a trance. He breaks it and asks her to let him be. Initially, Sarah is determined to grow into her wifely duties, but things just keep getting stranger. First, Richard won't sleep with her and won't tell her much. Around town, people are dying from a plague. One night, she overhears Richard talking to a guest about the plague. Apparently, a man's symptoms got so bad that he killed his wife. Richard orders Sarah to retreat to bed, but she witnesses him killing the guest. The next morning, she finds a secret door to the basement and spots the guest's walking stick. Overwhelmed with fear, she rushes to Pastor Collins' church and is more alarmed when he tells her that Richard has made a deal with the devil. They blame him for the plague and the disappearances of many, including his former wife. They're hoping she will help them kill him. He asks her to secretly leave the door to the house open that night. Over dinner, Richard laments about the burden of leadership. Sarah slips and mentions the disappearances that Pastor Collins mentioned earlier, but thankfully she recovers herself. That night, a man breaks in to kill Richard and stabs him in his sleep. Surprisingly, Richard mysteriously survives. Sarah quickly realises he is not a normal person, and he warns her not to leave the house ever again, promising to find the one wishing him death. He sends her to her room to pray while he cleans up. The next morning, Sarah awakens to find herself locked inside the house. She gathers the courage to go into the basement and find her way out, and she then runs to the church to tell Pastor Collins what happened. She urges him and his group to send strong men to kill Richard, as she is sure he is the devil. The pastor asks her to spike Richard's drink, and he offers to help her and the kids escape town as soon as the deed is done. Ahead of dinner, Sarah writes her concerns about Richard controlling the island with his pendant necklace. She fears that he will kill her. He finds her writing the journal and insists on reading it. That night, Sarah bravely tries to seduce Richard by giving him spiked brandy. He realises something is up when she refuses to drink from the same glass, and he starts choking her. One of his sons comes to her rescue and hits him with a log, and he claims that his dad already killed his mum. She gets the kids ready to leave and they rush to the shore. In the meantime, Pastor Collins and his committee rush to the house to capture Richard before he gains consciousness. Unfortunately, the ship leaves without Sarah and the kids, who arrive too late. She urges the kids to get on the boat to reach the ship, and the doctor's wife appears, seemingly sick and covered in blood. She asks to join them and attacks Sarah when she refuses. A fight then ensues and Sarah wins, and she and the kids take the boat and leave the island. Meanwhile, Pastor Collins and his committee find Richard and bury him alive. He tries to warn them that he made a deal with the devil for their sake, and he begs them to honour the deal and set him free as he can't die. He screams as they tell him that Sarah and the kids have already left, and they ignore his plight and bury him. The episode then ends with Wick and Patricia finding Richard's buried coffin. Episode 7 of Widow's Bay circles back to Tom falling asleep after his encounter with the demon haunting the island. He's awoken by a call from Wick and Sarah asking him to come to the museum. He rushes there only to be told that Richard is still alive and communicating through notes. Apparently he will only talk to the island's protector, and since he's the mayor he should be okay. Although scared out of his mind, Tom goes into the room to talk to Richard and get him to open his pendant necklace. He's surprised when Richard speaks and tells him about the pact he made with the demon. As it turns out, the demon took advantage of the first settlers because it knew they were desperately hungry. Richard made a deal to sacrifice lives in return for settling there. He opens his necklace to reveal the signed covenant he made with the demon. The reason he's alive stems from the fact the demon sustains him to keep the pact going. If they want to save the island, Richard suggests taking him out of the island where the demon has no reach. That way he can die and the pact will end. He asks to see his family stuff, which, luckily, is still in the museum. In the meantime, Tom convinces Wick to try Richard's plan. Wick agrees on the condition that Tom convinces Richard to get back inside the coffin. Tom tells Richard they will let him out once they get on the boat. Simultaneously, Bashir arrives after getting a noise complaint, and Patricia goes out to distract him and he ends up driving her home. He asks what Tom is doing, as no one has reached him for a day. Patricia comes clean about everything, but Bashir assumes she's cuckoo. He asks her to relay his resignation message to Tom, as he's not about to find out whether there is some truth to her outrageous claims. On the boat, Wick plans to get as close to the border as he can, and then have Tom tow Richard's coffin past the border in a dinghy. Things get dicey though when Tom ignores Wick's orders and lets Richard out the coffin. Wick tells him a story about how one of his friends died when they were younger, because they had mistakenly got too close to the border after stealing a boat and paid a heavy price for it. Wick feels guilty because he abandoned his friend to save himself, and that is how he knows Richard will try to live. In the meantime, Tom gives Richard food and tries to stay calm. As they get closer to the border, Richard attacks them. They manage to get Richard back into the coffin just as they get to the border. Tom is forced to give Wick a life ring and pushes him out of the boat. Thankfully, Richard turns into a pile of bones and dust when they cross the border. Tom quickly turns the boat and gets Wick, and they feel proud of themselves, thinking they've ended the curse. Back in town, Kelly convinces Evan to go through Tom's room and find out his secret. Evan is worried that his dad is lying, but is not sure about exactly what. They come across pictures of a young Evan with his mum, and he realises that Tom lied about his mum dying during childbirth. The episode then ends with Kurt kicking out a customer at the inn. The scene then shifts to a painting on the wall, and within this painting is a little boy, presumably Richard's son, reaching out to a hand after their boat sank. Episode 8 of Widow's Bay starts with Tom, Wick and Patricia having breakfast, feeling safe after getting rid of the founder. Tom is planning to take his son to the Red Sox game, while Patricia is content with some alone time. Obviously, Tom returns to work, telling Ruth that everything is fine, even though he's been MIA for 2 days. While Patricia grumbles about her wrong food order, Tom heads home to find Evan waiting for him. Now his son confronts him about the lies and how his mum really died, and it turns out that she suffered from preeclampsia during birth and also never fully recovered mentally, forcing him to put her in a mental home. As she died 2 years later from a brain aneurysm. With the secret out, Tom openly talks to Evan and promises a trip to Chicago, and in a way, the truth sets him free. On the other hand, Wick visits a museum and gives Jerry an old picture of them and their late friend. They're interrupted before he can explain more though, and he leaves. On his way out, he learns that someone robbed the museum and took the boogeyman's mask. He goes to check the boogeyman's house and finds it vandalised. Meanwhile, Patricia is at home going through old stuff when the alarm on a mobile library van starts blaring. She goes to check and, upon returning, quickly senses she is not alone. She grabs her corded taser, which is running low on battery, and rushes out the house. The boogeyman slowly follows as she knocks on a few doors trying to get help. She ends up at Chris's house, her old classmate who hates her guts. Another argument ensues as Chris and her friends confront Patricia for lying. They think she's trying to get attention, and she admits to lying about the calls but insists that a boogeyman is real and is after her. Chris continues to be a pain, so Patricia winds up tasing her. Chris's friends kick her out before she can sufficiently charge her taser. Outside, she realises that the boogeyman is inside Chris's house, and a few seconds later the man jumps from the window and Patricia trips. He catches up to her and is about to stab her when the paramedics that Chris's friends called arrive. The boogeyman miraculously survives getting hit with a car and slices the throat of one of the paramedics. This time Patricia runs to the convenience store at a gas station where Bashir is shopping. She tries to set the boogeyman on fire, but the shop attendant puts it out. The boogeyman overpowers him, forcing Bashir to step in with a shotgun. He's also overpowered and injured in the process. Finally, Patricia grabs a gun and takes the boogeyman out once and for all. Refusing to take any chances, she trains a shotgun on the man's head from the crime scene to the ambulance and lastly to the morgue for cremation. Afterwards, she learns that Bashir's wife is pregnant and warns him to leave that night before the baby is born. In the meantime, Wick is relieved that Patricia is fine as he couldn't find her at her place. At Tom's house, he and Evan have a heart-to-heart talk. Wick interrupts to warn Tom that the town's ordeal is far from over. Episode 9 of Widow's Bay starts with a flashback of Sarah and the kids escaping the island. As we now know, only one of the kids, Francis, made it back to the shore after the shipwreck. Presently, Patricia tries to convince Tom to sound the alarm as a big storm hits the town. Initially, Tom is against it, worried about the economic hit the town will take. He's frustrated that all his efforts have borne no fruit. Within his frustration, he takes it out on a painting in his office and Patricia winds up having an epiphany. She realises that the woman in the painting, who's missing a finger, is none other than Frances Warren. It also dawns on them that if Frances made it, they need to go through 400 years of ancestry to find any living ancestors. With the storm raging, they don't have time for that. Tom sounds the alarm, asking everyone to come to the town hall shelter. Meanwhile, Bashir and his wife are at the port hoping the ferry will come. Unfortunately, once the siren rings, he realises there is no hope. He figures he will just take a boat, but Wick talks him out of that terribly dangerous idea and drives them to the town hall shelter instead. At the shelter, Wick comes across Sarah's diary and asks Rosemary to do the ancestry, as he needs answers. In the meantime, Tom begs his son not to leave the shelter, and this time Evan is understanding. Unfortunately, the generator gives out, forcing Tom to leave for Garrett's place to get a starter. He and Garrett end up missing each other due to a communication mishap with the walkie-talkies. In the meantime, the town hall staff try to make the townspeople comfortable in the shelter. Tom realises that the storm is getting worse, with a tornado on its way, and rushes back to the shelter. He gets there in time to stop Garrett from leaving, but unfortunately the tornado takes Todd away. On the other hand, Bashir's wife starts having contractions. Patricia notices a roof is still missing and informs Tom, who promises to figure out a way to help her. Wick summons them aside to hear Rosemary's findings on the Warren ancestry. At first, Patricia is against finding out, since she worries about what they might be forced to do. Wick and Tom insist on knowing the truth, claiming they have to consider the lives of many over one person. After a long explanation, Rosemary reveals the remaining descendant of Warren to be none other than Ruth. They start debating whether they should kill Ruth, and Patricia is against it. Wick says he could make it painless and quick, and as they talk, Tom receives a call from Mitch, alerting him that something is happening. Tom decides to take matters into his own hands and asks Wick to stand down. He promises to handle Ruth's issue, and the episode then ends with Tom walking off as Patricia asks what he's going to do. Episode 10 of Widow's Bay starts with Tom finding Ruth's medical records and realising that the doctor forbade her from taking oxycodone with diazepam. He then drives to Ruth's place. On the way, Patricia radios asking him to reconsider. He asks her to keep an eye on the shelter and Evan. For starters, Dr. Morgan examines Bashir's wife. It turns out she is mid-contractions. The news has Bashir tripping as he realises his child can't be born on the island. As the storm rages, Patricia and Wick try to keep people from panicking. She asks Dale to find games to distract the townsfolk while they figure things out. They don't know how long the storm will last, so they may be there for a while. To make matters worse, some of the food has expired. The electricity continues to flicker and everyone seems worried about themselves. In the meantime, one of Evan's friends finds an underground tunnel and convinces Evan and Kelly to explore it. They come across a secret bunker with the weird ancient sacrificial chair, which is also known as the Covenant chair. Elsewhere, Dale goes looking for games and finds old film reels of a former mayor explaining how the town occasionally sacrificed a few people to save it. He rushes outside the room just as Wick and Patricia try to calm the people after a food fight erupts. Out of nowhere, Dale screams, "This place is a death trap, run for your lives," and people start running just as the lights go off. Now Ruth thinks that Tom is there to take her to the bunker and is not suspicious when he suggests they hunker down for the storm together at her place. Tom tries to raise the hypothetical trolley problem with her and she insists that she wouldn't take a life to save many. Although conflicted, Tom goes ahead and poisons her tea. She innocently shows him old photos and talks about her family history, and Ruth then confides in Tom that she had a daughter whom she gave up for adoption. But Tom loses it when he realises that Ruth's daughter is none other than his late wife. In a shocking twist, Evan turns out to be the last descendant. Tom regrets poisoning Ruth and is about to rush to the hospital when Bashir shows up. Unfortunately, he's put the pieces together as well when talking to Rosemary and Patricia. Out of fear, he shoots Ruth, thinking she's the one who's the last descendant, and killing her would save his child. Tom is shocked and reveals that he's mistaken. Although Bashir holds him at gunpoint, Tom lies that he doesn't know the name of the remaining descendant. Now, Evan, PJ and Kelly start playing around while looking through the bunker. An adult, Kenny, finds them and asks them to leave. Kenny heroically stays behind to secure and lock the heavy bunker door latch so the teenagers can escape safely. Unfortunately, he winds up trapped inside as PJ and Kelly run away. Evan tries to open the door hatch but to no avail. Suddenly there's a noise, Kenny screams and the door opens. Evan goes to check what happened and only finds his torch left behind. He also notices that the latch to the vault door is open, and just then the storm suddenly stops. With the storm having subsided, Bashir and Tom realise that Ruth is still miraculously alive. It turns out that a toxic drug mixture in her tea only made her heavily drowsy, rather than killing her outright. Furthermore, Bashir's panic gunshot managed to miss all of her vital organs. Now at the bunker, Patricia and Wick assume that Tom killed Ruth. The following morning, Tom throws Ruth's family heirloom brooch into the ocean. He's about to get in the car with Evan when he hears the church bells tolling. It tolls 8 times, meaning they need to sacrifice 8 lives before the dark entity can rest. Tom is horrified as he realises that the worst is not behind them. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.